My father made the difficult decision to end his marriage with my mother in his mid-50s, specifically to be with his secretary. This life-altering event has drastically reshaped our family dynamics. Currently, my stepmother exerts a significant amount of control over me, constantly trying to manipulate situations in ways that negatively impact my life. Feeling overwhelmed and determined to protect myself from her destructive influence, I took the decisive step of removing her from my property. To provide some context, my father is 54 years old, and my mother is 52, emphasizing that this divorce happened when both were well established in their lives, driven by his newfound affection for a younger woman. About 4 years ago, my father achieved a major milestone in his career by being promoted to the position of director at the very company where he had dedicated 25 years of his life. This promotion was not only a personal triumph for him but also a source of immense pride for our entire family. Watching him rise to the leadership role in the company where he began as an intern a quarter-century ago was truly inspiring. On the other hand, my mother pursued her own entrepreneurial path by founding and managing her own advertising firm. Although her company doesn't match the vast scale of my father's organization, she maintains full control and authority as the head of her business. Together, our parents' professional successes highlight a legacy of hard work and achievement, underscoring the affluent and accomplished background from which I come. As for myself, I'm a 26-year-old man who has successfully established a career as a graphic designer. Unlike many of my peers, I don't work for any particular company. Instead, I operate independently as a freelancer. I'm also in the process of launching my own business venture, hoping for the best as I take this next step in my professional journey. This entrepreneurial spirit and early start in the digital realm owe a great deal to my mother. She was already deeply involved in the digital industry when the internet began to revolutionize how we connect and work. Thanks to her influence, I was exposed to the world of freelancing at a young age. I began honing my graphic design skills during my teenage years, and by the time I graduated high school, I was already earning thousands of dollars each week from my projects. This early success laid a strong foundation for my ongoing career and future entrepreneurial ambitions. I wouldn't go so far as to describe my parents' marriage as perfect, primarily because, over the years, I rarely saw them united as a couple. Their relentless pursuit of their individual careers and personal ambitions consumed so much of their time and energy that their interactions with each other became infrequent. However, this wasn't always the case. During my childhood, my parents epitomized what it meant to be a dynamic and harmonious team. They shared incredible synergy, especially when it came to their professional passions. Both were driven, vibrant, and possessed a zest for life that made them not only successful but also genuinely enjoyable to be around. Their combined enthusiasm and dedication created a joyful and nurturing environment for me, resulting in a childhood filled with happiness and fulfillment. The gradual distancing between my parents became apparent to me during my college years. I observed them increasingly pursuing their separate lives, each engrossed in their own endeavors. Initially, I dismissed this as a natural evolution that often occurs as individuals grow older and prioritize personal goals. I hadn't witnessed any overt conflicts or heard them speak ill of one another, which led me to believe their separation was amicable and simply a result of growing apart. However, over time, I uncovered a different reality. My father confessed that his affection for my mother waned significantly after she entered menopause. He attributed this shift to the challenging hormonal changes she was experiencing, which he found difficult to handle. Consequently, he sought comfort and emotional fulfillment elsewhere, ultimately developing a romantic relationship with his secretary, which led to the dissolution of his marriage with my mother. Following my father's elevation to the role of director, he was assigned a secretary. However, the affair actually began before his promotion was officially announced, during a time when rumors of his impending promotion were circulating throughout the office. Once his promotion was confirmed, my father became more serious about his relationship with her. When my mother discovered his infidelity, she handled the situation with remarkable grace and composure. Instead of causing a scene or engaging in conflict, she wished him well and amicably ended their marriage without any unnecessary drama. This is one of the qualities I most admire about my mother. She is the most sophisticated and bold woman I have ever known. Before finalizing the divorce, she made sure to secure her rightful share, the house they had been living in and a substantial portion of my father's savings as alimony. It's important to note that she wasn't acting out of greed. She and my father had built their wealth together, and she wasn't willing to let someone else benefit from the hard-earned money they had amassed. After the divorce, my father was left with almost nothing, aside from his car and some of his savings, which he began to spend lavishly on his new relationship with his secretary. The divorce between my parents was handled smoothly, with my father complying with all of my mother's demands. He understood that there was no point in fighting her because she was a strong and formidable person who could easily overpower him if he tried. Fortunately, I had already moved out and established my own place before all of this unfolded. During my college years, I rented a spacious 2-bedroom apartment, allowing me to enjoy a comfortable and independent lifestyle. My freelancing projects provided me with sufficient income to cover my rent and utilities, so I saw no reason to change my living situation. I didn't want to take sides in my parents' divorce because I loved both of them and respected their individual perspectives. As an adult, I understood the complexities of their relationship and felt that it was important to maintain harmony in my own life. For additional context, I was closer to my mother but maintained a good relationship with my father as well. I respected him because he always supported and cheered for my mother's successes. After the divorce, my father and his secretary, or lover as some might call her, began living together in a rented apartment since my mother had evicted him from their shared house. My father's company had a strict policy against dating co-workers, so he wanted to keep his relationship low-key until he figured out his next steps. However, his new partner was eager to share the news with her friends at work. She was considered a catch for a single mother working as a secretary, adept at handling calls and messages. Unfortunately, no one at work was truly a friend to her. Her best friend eventually leaked the information that she was dating my father, leading to both of them being fired from their jobs. As a result, my father lost his position as director due to this relationship. My mother, on the other hand, had the last laugh. A few months ago, I purchased my own house, a lavish 3-bedroom penthouse, marking a significant milestone in my personal and financial independence. Recently, my father visited me and asked for a favor. He requested that I allow him and his partner Linda, a 29-year-old woman, to stay at my house. He is planning to marry Linda next month and wants to move in with me. Currently, my father is unemployed and is exploring new business ventures, although it will take some time for these to become profitable. In the meantime, he is living off his savings since both he and Linda lost their jobs. I told my father that I needed time to consider his request because I had moved out to enjoy my privacy, and having them stay at my place would disrupt my personal life. My father assured me that he and Linda would not interfere with my daily routine and that I could continue living as I pleased. I discussed my father's request with my mother, and she told me that the decision was ultimately mine. She is not a vindictive person and believes that I am old enough to make these decisions independently. While I want to help my father, I am uncertain about how Linda will behave and am feeling quite confused about the situation. My father has always been a loving and caring parent, and I feel guilty about turning him down, especially when he needs support the most. I would greatly appreciate it if anyone could share their experiences or advice on dealing with a similar situation. After much discussion and contemplation, I ultimately agreed to let my father and Linda stay at my house. He informed me that they would move in after their wedding. I initially thought their wedding would be a modest affair since it was a second marriage for both of them, but I was mistaken. They had an extravagant wedding, and shortly after, they left for a honeymoon. I couldn't help but wonder where they sourced the funds for such a lavish event and the subsequent honeymoon, but I decided it wasn't my concern. A few months have passed since they moved in. As mentioned earlier, Linda is a single mother to a spirited 5-year-old daughter who seems to be a mirror image of her mother. She constantly moves around the house, leaving a trail of chaos in her wake. Contrary to what one might expect, she's not the adorable little girl you might imagine. Instead, she's one of those entitled children who demands everything they see or else they throw tantrums. Meanwhile, my father is still in the process of establishing his business, actively seeking investors to support his ventures. However, I haven't seen Linda make any efforts to attend job interviews or seek employment herself. It appears she's content to rely on my father's financial support. She hosts visitors almost every other day, sometimes family members, other times friends, and occasionally strangers she's befriended at the supermarket. Essentially, she's one of those gossip-loving women who claim to be social butterflies but in reality spend their days lounging and engaging in idle chatter. While this might seem normal to others, it strikes me as odd to see her idling around the house all day without contributing. This is especially noticeable because my mother never idled at home like this, except on days when she was unwell. My mother was always diligent, even working on weekends for a few hours while the rest of us were asleep. I'm unsure whether my father has been transparent with Linda about his financial situation. Given her lifestyle, it doesn't appear that my father is facing any monetary issues. It could be that he hasn't disclosed the full extent of his finances to her, or perhaps he's been dishonest with me. The latter seems more likely, considering I witnessed the financial fallout from their divorce and how much he had to give up for my mother's sake. Linda needs to understand that my father isn't financially secure and that she should consider moving out if she wants to maintain a decent standard of living. Regardless, they are the least of my concerns at the moment. On a brighter note, I've met someone wonderful named Alice, a 23-year-old vlogger who isn't particularly famous yet. Due to privacy reasons, I can't reveal her full identity, but I can share that I've fallen deeply for her charming personality. I was an avid fan of her content and recently started editing her videos, making her my client. Despite never having met her in person, our interactions were limited to virtual calls. It sounds like a classic online romance, but my feelings for her grew as I worked on her videos. She's stunning in her travel footage, and the raw, unedited clips were what truly captivated me. Putting aside the admiration for her beauty, I'll get straight to the point. After much hesitation, I finally mustered the courage to ask her out last month. It wasn't a formal date, more of a work-related meeting, but she perceived my intentions and responded positively. Alice is even more beautiful in real life than she appears on camera. Since then, we've been meeting regularly, and I'm hopeful that our relationship will continue to flourish. We typically spend time at her place, so privacy isn't an issue. She lives with her teenage sister, 2 dogs, and 3 cats in a house that the sisters inherited from their grandfather. Alice's parents are separated and have remarried different people, which is why the 2 sisters lived with their grandfather until his passing 4 years ago. Since then, Alice has taken on the role of guardian for her younger sister. Therefore, even if my house were empty, Alice wouldn't feel the need to move in with me. I just hope that my father's business takes off soon so that they can find their own place and move out of my house. Linda and her daughter haven't been a major source of trouble for me so far, but recently, I've noticed Linda overstepping her boundaries. On 2 occasions, she made unsolicited comments about my living habits, but I firmly shut her down. I'm not someone who will tolerate her intruding into my personal space. If she continues to cross the line, I won't hesitate to put her in her place. A year has passed since my last update, and there's a lot to share. First and foremost, I'm engaged. Last week, I got down on one knee and proposed to Alice. I understand that some might think it's too early, but I've been certain about my feelings for her since the moment we first met. However, the situation at my house has taken a turn for the worse. Linda has proven to be a truly malicious presence. While I don't entirely blame her, I believe my father has also contributed by keeping her under the false impression of his financial stability and enabling her narcissistic tendencies. In the beginning months of their stay, she didn't cause much trouble, despite having friends and family visit frequently. But gradually, Linda began to overstep. She started criticizing the state of my room, insisting that I needed to tidy up and manage my laundry more diligently. Who was she to judge my personal living habits? My mother had never intruded into my personal space, and I've been living independently for years. Initially, I ignored her comments, but her persistent nagging forced me to involve my father. I privately asked him to address Linda's behavior, and he apologized on her behalf, telling her to give me some space. She didn't take kindly to being reported to my father, but she didn't escalate the situation further. A few months later, my father went on an official trip to San Francisco to meet with potential investors. Linda seized this opportunity to further torment me. She began dictating household chores, ordering me to do the dishes, clean the laundry, and even mow the lawn. Naturally, I refused to comply. I prepared my own meals and handled the cleaning tasks on my own schedule. After all, it was my house, and no one had the authority to impose rules on me. My refusal to comply only aggravated her, leading to an outburst where she accused me of being a lazy bum who was living off my father's money and doing nothing productive. What she fails to understand is the truth of my situation. I was never living at my father's house or relying on his finances. The reality is that I work from home due to the nature of my profession. I'm self-employed, not unemployed, and my work keeps me busy online and on my laptop. I wanted to confront Linda about her misguided perceptions, but I wasn't sure what my father had told her. I feared that revealing the truth might strain their already fragile relationship, so I chose to let her remain in a sort of bubble until my father returned from his business trip. I didn't want to add to his stress, especially since he was already dealing with investors. If Linda's behavior wasn't troublesome enough, she brought a mini version of herself into my home, making it increasingly difficult to maintain peace. Day by day, her behavior became more monstrous. She would pull down my curtains, tamper with my important electronic devices, and break things almost daily. Linda showed no interest in establishing any sense of discipline or order in the house. During the month my father was away, Linda relentlessly tested my patience. Her demands grew each day, ranging from asking me to clean the entire house to urging me to do the dishes. Naturally, I didn't comply, but her constant nagging began to wear on my nerves. To avoid her, I started staying out of the living room as much as possible, but she persisted, knocking on my door and ordering me to complete household chores. It felt like I was under house arrest in my own home. When my father finally returned, I wasted no time in confronting him about Linda's behavior. I told him that I couldn't continue sharing my home with her and insisted that she either tone down her actions or leave. In response, my father apologized on her behalf, explaining that Linda was 3 months pregnant and that her hormonal changes were contributing to her problematic behavior. This reminded me of why my father had divorced my mother in the first place, due to her intense menopausal hormones. Now, faced with a similar situation, I wondered how he would handle Linda. I expressed my desire to have Linda removed from my house, but my father pleaded for a few more months to sort things out. I mentioned my relationship with Alice and my plans to settle down with her soon, emphasizing that I would need privacy in my home by then. At that time, I hadn't yet proposed to Alice. My father assured me that within 6 months, his business would take off, allowing him to find his own place. I pressed him on whether he had informed Linda that the house was mine, as she was the one bossing me around. He avoided answering directly and shifted the conversation to another topic. I suspect he hasn't told her the truth and may not intend to, leaving me puzzled about what he sees in her that has led him to risk everything for her. In the meantime, I've been spending most of my time at Alice's house, which has been a much-needed relief. I'm hopeful that I can get rid of Linda as soon as possible. However, Linda has proven to be an unstoppable force. In my previous update, I shared that I proposed to Alice and intended to marry her in the coming months. Just a month after our engagement, Linda decided to visit my house. Typically, she doesn't come over because I spend most of my days at Alice's place, but this time, I was bedridden with a severe viral fever and unable to even lift my head. Linda was aware of my family's complicated dynamics but didn't fully grasp the extent to which she believed the house was hers. I'm not one to engage in gossip, so I kept my interactions with her minimal. My fever was so intense that Alice stayed with me for a couple of days to take care of me. During this time, Linda took the opportunity to turn Alice against me. She falsely accused me of being a lazy bum who does nothing. Alice, who knows about my profession and my earnings, stood up for me. Not satisfied, Linda shifted her tactics, arguing that it's not just about earning money, that a man should assist his wife with household chores. She claimed that I never lift a finger around the house while she handles all the cooking, cleaning, and other tasks. According to her, this behavior stems from my patriarchal upbringing. She also mentioned that my father doesn't help her with anything, even during her pregnancy, forcing her to manage everything on her own. While Alice isn't interested in my money, she clearly seeks a partner who will share in household responsibilities instead of leaving everything to her. This issue might seem trivial to some men, but for many women, it's a deal breaker. If Linda's actions weren't enough, she went further by accusing me of having a cheater's blood, drawing parallels to how my father cheated on my mother. She deceitfully claimed that I had already cheated on Alice and brought other women into our home. When Alice asked for details about these supposed women, Linda fabricated stories, claiming she had seen me with them. It was all false, but I was too sick to notice the sudden change in Linda's behavior. As a result, Alice left my house the next day. After a week of recovery, I met with Alice, and she seemed increasingly doubtful about continuing our relationship. When I inquired, she remained silent, only expressing that she felt we were moving too quickly. I immediately realized that Linda must have influenced her, as Alice is typically a confident and clear-headed person. Alice had genuinely accepted my proposal, and she meant every word, but now she was second-guessing it. I confronted her about whether Linda had said anything to her. At first, she hesitated, but eventually, she admitted the truth. I explained to Alice the reality of Linda's deceitful behavior and how Linda had been delusional about my father's financial situation. Alice's primary concern wasn't money, she needed a supportive partner who wouldn't treat her like a doormat. By the time I tried to explain further, the damage was already done, and Alice began to drift away. I decided to give her the time she needed, but I knew I had to remove Linda from my life to eliminate the poison she had introduced. Filled with frustration, I returned home and confronted Linda about the lies she had told Alice. She smirked and doubled down on her falsehoods. In a fit of anger, I stormed into her room and began throwing her belongings into the living room. She hurled insults at me, daring me not to push her further. She threatened to make me homeless if I didn't stop. Additionally, she threatened to call the police and report me to my father. I responded by telling her to do whatever she wanted, but she retorted that it was her house and I had no right to interfere. Laughing angrily, I shattered her facade, asserting that the house was mine and that my father had only allowed them to stay because of his own circumstances. I demanded that she keep her mouth shut and leave the house. She continued to abuse me and attempted to grab me by the collar to drag me out. I managed to free myself and warned her not to lay a finger on me. At that moment, my father arrived home, likely because Linda had called him as I was disposing of her things. He tried to comfort me, but I didn't hold back, telling him that bringing such a woman into his life was a grave mistake. Linda wanted my father to punish me for using harsh language, but he sternly told her to stop. She insisted that my father throw me out of the house. Finally, my father had to admit that the house was mine. Linda was taken aback and started hurling insults at him, calling him a cheater and other derogatory names. My father then took me aside, pleading for one last chance to keep Linda. I refused, explaining that she had tried to sabotage my engagement and ruin my life. She had already tormented me enough. I firmly told him that he could take Linda wherever he wanted, but I couldn't allow her to turn my home into a chaos-filled house. My father eventually gave up, packed all their belongings, and left. Throughout the ordeal, I could hear Linda cursing me, my father, and even my mother. I felt an urge to confront her physically, but I decided against it to avoid further complications. Now, a week has passed since Linda left. While it was satisfying to stand up to her, it's undeniable that my relationship with my father has been damaged. I recognize that I crossed a line by verbally abusing Linda, but I hope my father understands that Alice is incredibly important to me and that Linda attempted to sabotage our relationship. The day after the confrontation, I met with my mother and recounted everything that had transpired. She found the situation amusing, laughing heartily while enjoying a glass of wine. I complimented her, telling her she's a woman of class. My mother took the initiative to invite Alice out for dinner to help clear the air regarding the patriarchal issues within our family. Her candid and heartfelt conversation provided comfort to Alice, as my mother spoke truthfully about how supportive and respectful my father had been. Despite their separation, my mother doesn't impose her opinions forcefully, but her straightforward and genuine manner makes her arguments convincing. She advised me to give Alice some space and let her make her own decisions. I'm optimistic that things will improve since Alice still wears my ring as a symbol of our engagement. My mother also warned that once Linda realizes my father is financially unstable, she might start pursuing other wealthy men. She jokingly referred to Linda as a serial chaser, highlighting how she tends to seek out affluent men one after another. As for my father's situation, I'm no longer sympathetic because I believe he brought this turmoil upon himself by making the wrong choices. In a separate matter, I want to share another story about my boyfriend's situation with his young, flirty professor. My boyfriend, a 24-year-old man, became friends with his former professor, a 25-year-old woman, sometime last year. I'm unsure how to interpret this friendship. They seem friendly and communicate regularly every week, and from what he tells me, their interactions are mostly superficial. Last year, after the course concluded, my boyfriend, his professor, and some of his male classmates went out to eat together. My boyfriend mentioned that he was planning to attend a plastic modeling show, and his professor expressed interest, inviting herself to the event. She also asked if she could stay at his Airbnb with his friends. My boyfriend and his friends agreed to this arrangement. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend the event, but according to my boyfriend, he and a few friends gathered at the Airbnb that same day. His professor arrived at their Airbnb, bringing along a few of her girlfriends. I believe they all stayed in the same place. The following day, they attended the modeling show, went to a bar afterward, and had drinks. Most of them, except my boyfriend, became quite intoxicated. My boyfriend took on the role of the designated driver for his professor and her friends. During the event, his professor won some model kits and, even in her inebriated state, asked my boyfriend if he could stay up late with her to work on the kit together. From what he has shared, nothing else transpired that night. After the event, everyone from that group created a group chat and has continued to plan and discuss future events together. My boyfriend and his friends met up with his professor again and even got to meet her fiancé at an anime convention, and it seemed like they all got along well. His professor continues to show interest in attending other events, and it appears she may be planning to attend another plastic modeling show with my boyfriend and his friends in the near future. I have complete trust in my boyfriend and don't believe he's hiding anything from me. However, I find it difficult to fully understand the nature of their friendship, given that she is his professor. I have addressed my concerns with him, and he reassured me that I have nothing to worry about. Nonetheless, I would like to hear others' opinions and understand what you all think about this friendship. Is this something I should be concerned about, or is it harmless? Thank you. To provide more clarity, the professor in question was my boyfriend's former instructor. She holds a position as an adjunct faculty member and also works as an accountant full-time, which explains her relatively young age for a professor. My boyfriend hasn't graduated college yet and is still a student at his university. My boyfriend and I had a more in-depth conversation about his relationship with his professor. He acknowledged that their friendship had overstepped some of my personal boundaries. He speculated that her behavior might stem from her feeling bored when hanging out with her fiancé's friends, leading her to seek attention from others. Several weeks later, my boyfriend initiated a conversation with his college instructor to address our concerns. He explained how I felt uncomfortable with their friendship and suggested that they should minimize their communication. She responded by saying she understood, mentioning that her fiancé had also expressed discomfort about her decision to share an Airbnb with my boyfriend. She clarified to my boyfriend that she views him as a brother, which is why she feels so comfortable around him. Despite this, she assured him that she would respect his wishes to keep their interactions to a minimum. Despite this conversation, the professor continues to message my boyfriend weekly with random life updates. Additionally, since she's part of my boyfriend's Discord chat group, one of his friends invited her to attend another plastic modeling show. Recently, she accepted the invitation and agreed to join us for dinner, so I decided to attend as well to meet her in person. The dinner was quite uncomfortable because she largely ignored me throughout the evening. When she joined us at the table, she greeted my boyfriend warmly but didn't acknowledge me at all. My boyfriend noticed her behavior and became annoyed, but he still introduced us to maintain some level of decorum. Throughout the night, she became increasingly intoxicated, making random comments about my boyfriend to his friends, such as suggesting he could have been the best student in my class if not for missing some assignments. And mentioning that my boyfriend had left her a 5-star review on Rap My Professor. Ultimately, she didn't attend the modeling show, but my boyfriend spoke with his friends afterward, and they expressed a desire to respect my feelings by making future gatherings more male-centric. I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on whether you find her behavior suspicious or if you think there's nothing to worry about in this situation.